Next, we have a young lady from Milwaukee, Maddy Power. So she's a video producer from Milwaukee, who's been all around the world. She's from Green Bay, that's right. I know. She works in Milwaukee now, and she's going to be talking about some really cool VR stuff. Here we go, Maddy. Everyone welcome Maddy, please.
Okay, and then this is just to the
Yep.
Okay.
Hey guys.
Hey.
So I'm going to talk about storytelling in VR. First, I'm going to talk for a hot second about, so VR stands for virtual reality. I shouldn't assume everybody knows that. But before I talk about virtual reality, I want to talk a little bit about regular reality. So the idea is that if we see it, then that's reality, right? So from our eyes, the things that we see, they go into our visual cortex of our brain, and then from there we create our constructed reality, like what we perceive. And from our constructed reality, we form biases in our worldviews and our implicit biases and our belief system and how we navigate the world, right? And it's not just sight, it's all of our senses that create the constructed reality that we navigate the world with. So some early forms of VR. VR is not new, it's been around forever, it's just like higher tech now. I will share a little bit of a story about an early form of VR called a book that had a direct impact on who I am now as a person. So when I was little, probably about 10 years old, I first read the book Harriet the Spy. It's about an 11-year-old girl who lives in New York City, and she just like roams around the city and sneaks into places and writes it down everything that she sees. Okay? And I finished that book, like I shut it, and I was like, Mom, Dad, I am a spy now. This is it for me. I'm going to be a spy. And I ran around my neighborhood over by Preble High, and I like hopped fences and trespassed a lot, and peered into windows, and I just wrote down everything I saw because I was so immersed in this book, and I felt so connected to Harriet, and I like thought I was her. Okay, and then the Nickelodeon original film Harriet the Spy came out, and I was like, yeah, like seriously, this is it. Like, so I eventually grew out of it. That the end of the summer, I was not spying on anyone anymore, but I never lost that sense of navigating the world through curiosity and constantly asking questions and documenting everything and questioning authority. So I would say Harriet the Spy was my first like immersive VR experience, okay, and it changed my brain. So this is contemporary VR, so it's a little bit different than a book. It's just higher tech, and we look dumber doing it. So what I do is I create films that when they're on your head, on your headset, they're all around you. Okay, so you look 360 degrees, and you're in this environment. Okay, you can sometimes even walk around. That's called volumetric VR, but or they're standalone experiences. So there's a few different ways that you can do it. You can do a 360 video camera, which usually is like a single camera with two lenses that capture 180 degrees, and then you stitch it afterward. You can make a CG VR world, which is kind of like a computer game or a video game, which stands for computer game imagery. Or something called photogrammetry, which is super fancy, and basically you take like hundreds of photos with a DSLR camera of every angle and then stitch it around, and you can physically walk around the environment. So a few different projects that I've worked on. This is one that we made with Planned Parenthood in 2016, and we premiered at Sundance that year, where you are in the headset and you're fully immersed with these two women who are trying to navigate to get to an abortion clinic through all the protesters, okay? So this is a buzzword that you'll hear a lot in VR, empathy. Like VR is called the empathy machine because the idea is that when you're in this headset and you're immersed in this world and you're in someone's shoes, you will feel empathy for their situation. So with Across the Line, we wanted to create that awareness around that situation, that maybe you are against abortion, but you also are against harassing women. How am I doing on time?
5.5 minutes.
Okay. A few other ones that I've worked on. I produced for the New York Times website, so they have a 360 video component, And I went out in Lake Michigan and filmed the polar plunge. Has anyone ever seen the polar plunge? It's like a super quirky thing that is very normal to us, unfortunately, but like the rest of the country is fascinated. So people really like that. And then in this past winter, I made a story with this woman named Eileen who has Alzheimer's. And in the headset, you're with her, and she's talking to you, and you see her, and it looks like she's looking at you. You see her go in and out of lucidity with her memory loss. And I filmed with her husband too, so it's not just about her, but it's also about how a marriage continues when somebody has Alzheimer's. Okay. Another one that I'm working on right now in post-production is about Arthur Ashe, who was the first black man to win the U.S. Tennis Open in 1968, and he went on to win Wimbledon. And this one it's a bit of a sports story, but really it's about being a black athlete in a white sport. And we want to use VR because we really wanted to put you close there with Arthur, and we go into his head with animation and VR. So, not only did he have the pressures of going out and to play this game, the biggest game of his life, and he's like a young man, but also he had the pressures of like Muhammad Ali calling for boycotts of the white man's game, and Nelson Mandela, and just a lot of pressure. And he went on to use his platform for activism and advocating for equal rights for young black youth and ending apartheid in South Africa. So it's a VR experience about like what it's like to be a black athlete and how it's harder than just being a white athlete. And another one is called Project 2045, and that is a VR experience where you're in California in 2045 if it was 100% renewable energy and what that could look like. So it's beautiful. And we shot at some really amazing places, like a sustainable farm where like the sheep are like working on the farm. And this one we like added in special effects, so obviously there's not like these electric charging stations on the highway. We did that in post-production, but we're going to bring that to policymakers with the help of a foundation and a political campaign company to hopefully incentivize them to put more policies and rules around how much the energy produced in California has to be green. And then we're not the only ones that do this, or I'm not the only one that does this. There's a ton of really interesting things. Like one of my favorites is this one called Tree, where you're in the headset and you start out as a little seed and you like grow into this giant tree in this forest. And there's like birds like landing on your arms, which are like your branches. And then a forest fire comes and burns you down. And it's crazy, and it's really sad, and people like cry in it. It's wild. And then this one is called Clouds Over Sidra. And in that one, you're in Syria with this little 12-year-old girl named Sidra, and she's telling you about what it's like to be in Syria at the time. And it's just the first time that I've ever talked to a bunch of little Syrian girls. And I'll probably never forget that. And you like see her do her homework while there's like bombs going off, and it's really crazy. And then this one is called Notes on Blindness, and in that one, it's the experience of what you see when you're going blind, and you actually hear a real recording of this man who documented his experience going blind. So it's kind of a documentary VR experience. And then there's more things that you can do with the senses in VR too. So there's interaction with this piece of technology called the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift. You have controllers and you can like interact with things. And then that's called a haptic glove. So I did this crazy thing at Sundance this year where I like stuck my hand in this box and I had the headset on. And this little dragon like flew and landed on my hand, and I felt its little claws like land there, and then it breathed fire on me, and it was insane. So that's another component that you can add into your story. And then in this one, I helped this little girl find the wolves that she thought were in her walls, and it was super cute. And I held a magnifying glass with her, and we like went on a little mystery together. And being there with her, like up in her attic, just the two of us, like I just cared so much about her. It it was crazy to think about that. I was like, I just like really need to help this little girl, and she's super cute. So yeah, I think my time's about up, but this is a sentence that my team and I, we say a lot, not just repeat it. When all of your senses are in agreement about your current state of existence, that's reality.
So he's got some questions for Maddy.
Hey Maddy, great job. Right now I take my family to the movie theater and we watch a movie. Very interested in trying out some virtual reality stuff. Is there a venue or place where we can try this, or what's the best way to access the experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. People are still trying to figure that out. I'm not sure. Do you live in Green Bay?
I do.
I'm not sure about Green Bay. Like, VR cafes are popping up all over the place. I know that there's one in Wisconsin because I saw this news article about it, and it was somewhere really random to me, like Algoma or something. I was like, oh, that's where they're putting a VR cafe. I love that. So that's going to be more of a common thing. But otherwise, a lot of people are just going out and buying headsets, which is a little bit of an investment, but it's just going to get cheaper as the technology evolves.
You can like check out those movies and stuff that you...
Yeah, a lot of those actually have a headset that I can show people after this, but a lot of those are free too. It's like if you download this free app, you can just like download a bunch of films. Yeah.
So, not only the technology that you're involved with, but you're a storyteller, you're an activist.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, how do you find your stories? What motivates you?
Harriet the Spy. Just kidding. A lot of different things. Like like Alex said, I'm an activist, so a lot of my stories revolve around social justice, and VR is such an interesting space to tell stories around social issues because you have this ability to really put someone in someone else's shoes, to really have them feel for somebody. So it's an opportunity to put you in a black athlete's shoes, to put you in a woman trying to seek a health clinic's shoes directly, or to situations that you normally in everyday life you wouldn't experience. Yep, back there.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Our firm actually deals with augmented reality, and we're curious because we're actually dealing with kind of one ethical question that we're always facing. One side of the equation is saying that this sort of immersive technology is great because it does allow you to have this tangible experience to again really get connected. On the other side, though, we are hearing criticism that this is continuing the isolation of people and sort of that disconnect. I'm curious, have you heard that same sort of conversation going on, and I guess what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so that's something I think about a lot, but it's also something that every single technology has been asked. Like when the color TV came out, they're like, no one's leaving their living room. We got a color TV in the household. So not that it's something to disregard, it really isn't, but that is a topic that's brought up with every technology, and it is something that's scary. Like I'm afraid of my smartphone, even though I'm like addicted to it. So I think to solve that issue and to solve a lot of the issues that are that come along with emerging technology is like more media literacy and like more conversations about media literacy, and also more instant. I don't know. Put your kids outside more too. It's just I think it's so much about like how you raise kids too. But yeah. Is there anyone else have a question?
More questions for Maddy? Yep.
I've seen versions of headsets where you can just like put your smartphone into a headset. Do they do everything that what you've shown, or is they just
Yeah, that's actually like the most popular headset is one called the Samsung Gear, which is what I have, and that you just use like an Android phone and you put it in an Oculus headset and you can just like download an app. It's super easy.
And we have one of those here, right?
Yes.
Okay. So afterwards, the social networking component, do it, take a trip. Which ones do you have available? Which shows?
So I have Notes on Blindness, which is the one, the experience of being blind. I have Clouds Over Sidra, which is the Syrian refugee one. I have My Alzheimer's Story. I have a few other ones too. I downloaded like a bunch before I came here.
Cool.
So we can discuss if you're interested.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much, Maddy. Okay,